Hi guys. Sorry that we're not able to meet in person. But if there was any time not to do it, this is definitely this particular presentation is kind of the one to do it. So thank you for being okay with that. So this week we're going to be talking about iReady data, and a lot of it you may already know. And so you're like, Rachel, I got it. That's okay. But what I was thinking this week was, Matt talked about that -2 to +2 model at the beginning of the year. And I was sitting there thinking, if I were in the classroom, I would want to know, what does that look like on my road to getting that +2? What am I doing with that? And so that's what this week's gonna be talking about. So let's first talk about typical growth versus stretch growth. So these I'm sure you're both familiar with, but on terms of when in talking about the -2 to +2 model, typical growth we're going to think of as being at the zero in the middle of that number line, right? So, and we know the zero represents what we expect that kid to do within 1 year. So, within their time with you, here's the expected growth for that time. So, that's typical growth. Stretch growth is closer to the +2. Stretch growth is not only did they meet what we wanted them to in a year's worth of time, but they also exceeded that expectation. So exceeds growth, +2. Okay, if you're anything like me, you want to know where numbers come from. So this +15 that they're expected to grow by, right? So their scale score, let's say 530, and then you're adding an extra 15 points. Like, where's that coming from? So it comes from two things. The first is from kids who are in the same grade level, like nationally speaking, like how do they normally perform? So that's kind of an average where they start from, but it also comes from um, placement. So, for instance, if there's a kid that is in fourth grade but has placed two levels below, um, what is typical for that kind of kid to be able to grow? And so keeping both of those things in mind, that's where these growth scores come from, like these averaged numbers. Um, this is just a photo I had, and again, I have written here, like, what's the difference between these two students? We have Alex, two grade levels below Bianca. She's basically early on her grade level, so she's significantly ahead of where Alex is. Notice the difference in their typical growth and stretch growth. So their typical growth, obviously, Alex has to grow more than Bianca because he's farther behind, but the typical growth isn't too far off. Whereas the stretch growth, that's almost a 10-point difference. So Alex has a lot further to go. By the way, I'll backtrack up real quick. Stretch scores are based on proficiency. So if a kid is meeting their stretch score, that means that's the growth they're going to need to make to be on grade level. If they're already on grade level, this is a growth score to send them to advanced levels of proficiency. So kind of like what it would take to get them to then above grade level. That there's that. This is a visual representation because I'm a visual person of, again, typical growth versus stretch growth on that number line Matt was talking about. So 0 point typical growth, what we expect in 1 year of learning, and the +2 where we really want Glenn to be moving towards, and that's stretch growth. So I'm going to pop here. Again, you may already know where the typical growth and the stretch growth is, but if you notice where the red arrow is, that points to where you can find those two scores. And you'll go to reports, diagnostic results, and then you'll be able to find it. Also notice that little white bar, right, that the red arrow kind of covers up. The white bar is interesting because not only does it give you growth measures, typical and stretch, but it also does Lexile and national norms. Lexiles are what you're going to use to get a letter for a kid. So, like if they have an 872 Lexile, that might mean that they're a letter U on H&H, or a U for Fountas and McNell. They have a 500, maybe they're like an M. So these will help you, and I'm going to give you some correlation charts to kind of crosswalk from the Lexile to a letter.